we're going to be talking about why Invest and Why Now is supporting a tax solution, to raising more revenues to close this budget gap as opposed to cutting. And what we've also been talking about right now is rebalancing the tax code to make wealthier Washingtonians pay more. So now it feels like we're kind of conflating two things. Are they being conflated? Should they be conflated? How are you thinking about this?
Well, right now, the issue before us and the issue before the legislators, right, is that we are facing, estimates say between $10 to $15 billion of a budget shortfall over the next 4 years. We've seen Governor Ferguson has come out and asked for substantial cuts. What we know is that we're not going to be able to get to a balanced budget on cuts alone. We also know that making these types of cuts have significant impacts on the people of Washington State. The cuts we're looking at, really impact kids and families and seniors and veterans. And as our legislators are putting together a budget, we have to remember that our budget is a moral document. It's the way that we say this is what is important to us, this is what's important for our communities in this state. And we have the ability to be able to bring some additional revenue in, to be able to diversify our portfolio here in Washington State if we're able to pass some progressive revenue measures that ask the wealthy to do their part just like everybody else has been doing all along.
When we talk about state spending and where it goes, generally what we talk about is educating, medicating, incarcerating. We often hear that there's very little of the budget that's available to just go and cut and dispense with. A lot of it's mandated. If you're talking about Medicaid, it's $1 of state money and $1 of federal money. If you start cutting there, then you're giving up federal dollars. As you think about, and as you guys have done this analysis of the budget, where do you see the waste? Where do you see the fat, the opportunities to trim the sails?
Well, as a first pass measure there, it is, again, weird to be talking about cuts when we've got $10 billion more coming in over the next 4 years. That's just a kind of a funny position to be in. Again, during the Great Recession, you had actually declining revenues, so you simply had to cut money to make that happen. But if you look at, for example, homelessness, right. The state has spent more than $5 billion in homelessness over the last decade. And with that money being spent, we now have the third largest homeless population in the entire country, with the 13th most populous state. We have more than 2.5 times the number of people living without a home than the city of New York. So this is the city of Seattle, has more than 2.5 times the number of homeless people compared to New York, 6 times the number of homeless people compared with Chicago, 10 times the number compared with Philadelphia. And again, that's with substantial spending. And so again, it is worth, when you look at the actual spending that's going on, it's worth looking at the outcomes that we're getting. And in many instances, again, spending has gone up and outcomes have gone the exact wrong direction.
So to play devil's advocate on that, one could say that's not a spending problem or even necessarily wasted dollars. What's going on there is it's policy decisions on the other side of the ledger about how you spend that money. And for instance, if we're talking about the homelessness situation, prioritizing longer-term permanent housing over shorter-term shelter beds. That's a policy decision, right? Doesn't necessarily mean the state's wasting the money. Maybe they're not making the right policy decisions. But is that not... One could make the argument it's not an argument to start cutting that money. Maybe it's an argument for spend it differently.
Maybe not. But at the end of the day, if you're spending more than $5 billion of taxpayer money over the course of the decade, and we've got some of the worst homeless problems in the entire country, it is worth asking whether we're getting the right spending for that kind of money. If you look at crime rates, for example, as well, are worth talking about here too. We have the third highest crime rate in the entire country, with number 1 for motor vehicle theft. If you look at, again, all the things that you think you would be buying with state spending taxpayer dollars, in so many areas where we've spent, and it's spent substantially over the course of the last 10 and especially over the last 4 years, you've got worse outcomes. And so there is a world where you can spend better and smarter, and especially when you got $10 billion more coming in over the next 4 years, be able to meet the state's needs and get the people what they need.
You can check out the rest of the show by clicking on the link below or by watching Inside Olympia Thursday evenings at 7 and 10.